Hello everyone, and thank you for attending the Caspin Resources Limited webinar this morning. During this webinar, you will hear from Chief Executive Officer Greg Miles, and at the end of the presentation, Greg will be available to answer any questions you may have. Remember, if you want to ask a question, please do so by submitting them in writing using the Q&A function on your screen. Now, to give the presentation, Greg Miles, over to you.
Thanks, David, and welcome everyone to the Caspin Investor webinar and future shareholders, hopefully. So this presentation has been loaded on the ASX platform, so you read this disclaimer at your leisure. This presentation is going to focus on our recent results from Yarawindah Brook project. But just as a quick background on the company, well, the corporate snapshot, if you like, not much has changed on this. Our significant shareholders are still holding their position. Look, I guess what has changed is we've had a fairly volatile share price over the last couple of months. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, but it's certainly not a roller coaster for the company. Back in May, when we first put out our announcement with the visuals of Yarawindah Hill, that was a significant moment for our company, and it changed the value proposition for Caspin, and that hasn't changed. And I think that's the point of today's presentation, is that the share price and whatnot will sort itself out in due course, but this company has made a step change improvement in its understanding and like I say, the value proposition following the results from Yarawindah Hill. So on to Yarawindah. Just a quick recap. I think most people are familiar with the project now. I don't need to go into a huge amount of history, but just a quick refresher. Yarawindah Brook, just 40 kilometres north of Chalice's Julimar project, an hour and a half out of Perth. We've been operating in this part of the world since 2018, so we recognised the opportunity for this style of mineralisation some time ago, and so we've been pretty much unaffected by all the recent moves and tenement pegging in this part of the world, where we've been really happy with our land position. Since listing in November last year, we've been pretty active. Airborne EM surveys, ground EM surveys, soil geochemistry. More recently, we've gone back through the historical database and identified this opportunity for PGE mineralisation at Yarawindah Hill, which we've now drilled. We also drilled another prospect, XC29, and we've also, in between, whilst waiting for those drill results, we've also flown an airborne gravity survey as well, which is another interesting tool to help map these mafic intrusions. So it's been a very busy 9 months, and I think that's reassuring for our investors that a dollar invested in our company goes to work. It's not sitting idly by. So when I was looking at this presentation and updating it for these results, I came to this slide, and I actually decided to leave it in here because nothing on this slide, which is from May, has changed. We're still excited by the opportunity at Yarawindah Hill. We think it is still a potential new PGE discovery. What we talked about back in May was the right kind of rocks and the right kind of sulfide assemblages, which means that you're in the right kind of mineralized system. That was a big tick for us. Now it's only 2 holes, and I guess this is the challenge of a small sample set, is that it isn't going to be representative either on the positive or negative of what Yarawindah Hill could be. But it's probably good enough for a proof of concept. And I think we've done that with these results, which we'll get to in a second. The 2 holes, over a kilometre apart. So, we're talking about something with significant scale. And you know, as you can see on the right, that there has been, you know, a significant amount of exploration done here in the past, but it has been quite limited in terms of the depth of that drill testing. It defined near surface PG mineralisation over 2 kilometres, but I think it's actually more than that as well. So it's a big prospect, and the exploration in this part of the project has only really just begun. So into the sort of results themselves, pretty much, you know, what we described visually is pretty much what we got back from the assay results. So the hole 17 was pretty much mineralised from top to tail, which was a good sign. You know, well, mineralised in the sense of anomalous in both PGEs, nickel, copper, and, you know, a bit of cobalt, a bit of gold thrown in there as well. So, you know, that was really encouraging. And sort of within that is the sort of more stronger sort of mineralised zones. And within that, again, is some, you know, and the photos are there on the right-hand side. You know, there's some pretty significant grades of mineralisation, you know, albeit over reasonably narrow widths. Now, you know, that in itself is not, you know, it's not economic, and we won't pretend that it is. But what that does tell us is that, as I mentioned before, we're in the right kind of a system here. And, you know, the system's got some juice, and you know, that as a pure exploration hole, this was a really good start to our program. Now the hole 18, oops, sorry, go on, 1, 2, hole 18, probably not as strong as 17. We still saw the same sort of you know, mineralisation in the hole, albeit narrower width of host intrusion and narrower widths of mineralisation, but that's still encouraging that we can see that the intrusion is somewhat, at least at this stage of the program, reasonably continuous. Now, I guess what sort of surprised me and what, you know, ultimately disappoints me, I guess, about hole 18 is that you can see that this is actually drilled on one of the better historical sections in the prospect area. Hole 89 is well, easily the best PGE intercept, almost 30 metres at over a gram palladium and a little bit of platinum thrown in there as well. Now, sadly, we haven't been able to replicate that. And, you know, maybe that's because there's a dolerite dike there that is perhaps stoped. You know, that means displaced the mineralisation, and, you know, we've just been a little bit unfortunate with where we've positioned our hole. And probably more likely, you know, there's complexity here that we're yet to understand and discover. So, you know, most people and anybody who's looked at gold systems for a long time, most people sort of start out treating their ore systems as reasonably tabular kind of ore bodies, almost two-dimensional. And the reality is that mineralized systems, particularly these orthomagmatic kind of systems, are three-dimensional, and they don't, you know, just drilling down dip along strike isn't actually necessarily isn't necessarily the control on your mineralization. There's going to be some other complexity. And I guess what we have seen from this drilling to date is, and it's a work in progress, is that we are starting to see some internal architecture within that host intrusion. And from that, we'll be able to, so what I mean by that is that we can see chemical differences in the rocks. I mean, we already talked about the fact that the intrusion grades from sort of mafics to ultramafics and whatnot, but we're starting to see associations, mineral associations with sulfides and PGEs, and so that's great. That's going to help us with our targeting. Now, and sorry, I'll just also say that one of the key points, and I think some people have picked this up, is that we talk about the base of mineralisation increasing to the base of the ultramafic part of the intrusion. That's not to say that it's actually the base of the intrusion per se. The hole was terminated in what was definitely a barren gabbro, but is that actually the base of the intrusion? Maybe, maybe not. And you know, we're limited to you know, what we can see from some of the historical drilling and our own drilling, and we can't answer that question at the moment. And so that is part of one of our future programs. So where to from here, though? We've got a number of obvious targets, and I guess this is what we're excited by. Is well, firstly, we've been able to secure an RC rig to come back and do some more drilling for us in a couple of weeks' time. So relatively, we'll get back out on the ground relatively quickly. We've got a range of interesting targets. We're particularly interested in the up dip position. Not only is it because it's closer to surface, and you know that usually helps. You know, it's easier to explore closer to surface, but it also appears to be that's where the mineralisation or the intrusion itself might be somewhat flattening, and that can be quite an attractive place for mineralisation in these types of systems. And we referred to you know, Platte Reef in South Africa as an example of that, but even in some of my more recent history in the West Musgrave, you know, we saw similar sort of things where mineralisation, where intrusive positions were reasonably flat. That was sometimes a better place for sulfides to accumulate. So that's exciting for us. And there's a range of positions sort of along strike, so laterally, that we can test as well, sort of between holes 17 and 18. And as I said before, there's a kilometre's worth to play with there, and it's open down dip and elsewhere sort of along strike as well. So plenty of opportunities. 5,000 metres is really just a first stage. I think it's the right amount. It's about 20 holes. It gives us an opportunity to test various positions in the intrusion. And I guess what we're trying to do is we're trying to build up our data set so that we can vector towards where metal accumulations, and I say metal because it's not just PGs, it's nickel and copper as well, you know, might be more concentrated and hosted. You know, at the moment, our two holes were not quite targeted blind, but pretty close. You know, we were basing our hole positions using the historical drilling as a guide to geology only, really. We didn't have any sort of assays to guide us. So as we drill more holes, we'll be able to, and gain further geological information, we'll hopefully be able to vector towards where we might find a sweet spot in this prospect area. So it's still quite it's an active exploration plan, and you know, and it's going to be happening reasonably soon. Now, I guess the other bit of news, and this is also sort of relevant, is we did release some of our soil geochemistry a couple of weeks back, and this is also quite relevant as well because soil geochemistry is a great way to go and find these sort of ore bodies. As you can see on the left there, that's sort of a snapshot through the middle part of our project area. And I should say that the soil program is still ongoing. We've only sampled, I think it's just over 30% of the project with soil geochemistry. But what we've been able to identify so far is, well, clearly, and you can see from the inset, Yarawindah Hill is a very distinctive anomaly. It stands out. You know, the peak result of 300 ppb palladium is astounding, but it is also partly because we believe that the ore body is outcropping at surface. So you're always going to get strong numbers if you happen to sample directly on top of the ore body. But that's not necessarily the case elsewhere in the project area. There could be these, you know, we know these intrusions are reasonably flat lying, and they could be hiding just beneath the surface. So smaller, weaker geochemical signatures are just as interesting to us at the moment. They're just not as advanced, and we need to build our data sets up, using geophysics, using the geochem, and any other kind of field mapping, whatever we can do to bring these new targets up the priorities and get them ready for drill targeting as well. But in the meantime, we do have a couple of other sort of interesting positions at Yarra Hill. Two quite strong anomalies towards the east and northwest of Yarra Hill. We've circled that on the presentation. No drill testing whatsoever. You can probably see hole 17 looks like it's been drilled into that anomaly, but because of the angle and the weathering profile, that hasn't actually been tested. So we're hoping that all things going well, we'll be able to test those anomalies in this coming program or a subsequent program shortly thereafter. So that's also very exciting for us. And I guess that's kind of the lead into the big picture. And so getting back to my earlier comment, the fundamentals for our company, well, for the project and the company haven't changed. They've actually advanced. And if you're interested in this part of the world, this new mineral province, then I think Caspin is a great vehicle for getting exposure to it. Lot of ground that hasn't ever been explored for this, despite demonstrated PG nickel copper potential. We're continuing to add new data sets. We've flown a gravity survey, as I mentioned before. We haven't got the results of that yet, but I think that's going to help build our understanding as well. We'll continue to take soil geochem samples and bring all those new sort of targets up to drill readiness as well. So it's going to be a very busy remainder of 2021. Now, David, I thought we'd also just quickly touch on our Squires project. Excuse me. Because we did put out a release on that last week. It's I think the point of that release was just to remind, well, firstly, we had some new data, but also just to remind people that we've actually got a pretty handy project in the back pocket as well. So Mount Squires, we've previously looked at this as a sort of a gold project, recognizing also that it's a long strike from Nebo Babel, and Odds Minerals are working on a DFS on that as well. But there's a number of other regional prospects that show that it's more than just a one-hit wonder. That's a mine camp, and I think there's going to be some interesting developments in that part of the world in the near future. But the soil geochem results that we had that we published around the eastern portion of the project area gave us a sort of an interesting kind of signature, which is more akin to a copper porphyry system. So a very distinct molybdenum anomaly, which is depleted in copper, and this is quite common in weathered terrains because the copper leaches quite readily, whereas the moly doesn't. And then in these copper porphyry systems, and there's a spectrum of these porphyry systems. So no two ore bodies are the same, but you do tend to see this sort of characteristics. There's this zonation from the core of the system going outwards, and what we've seen is a moly core, sort of a lead annulus around it. So often you get sort of zinc lead zonation around a moly copper deposit, and then grading out further into sort of gold kind of anomalies or gold mineralization on the peripheries, which might actually explain hand pump prospect, which is something that we've sort of been interested in for a long time. And we've also been able to sort of reprocess some of the geophysics that has been done over hand pump, and interesting IP for those that aren't familiar is induced polarization. It's a way of measuring chargeability and resistivity. It's a great way of finding disseminated sulfide. So there's perhaps a disseminated sulfide body underneath hand pump, and it's sort of aligns itself with this sort of mag feature, a circular mag feature, and there's more detail in the announcement. which I encourage people to look at. But all this is really interesting, and it just tells us that more work is required at Mount Squires, and not forgetting, of course, that we are, as I mentioned, right alongside what I believe will be Australia's next nickel copper development at the West Musgrave. And there's an opportunity here for us to perhaps recognise some of that strategic nickel copper value that's sort of latent in our project as well. So just to wrap up, and before we get some sort of questions, I'll say it again, the fundamentals for our company are improving all the time. We've learned a hell of a lot from this drill program, and I think we've definitely provided a step change in the value proposition. We're confident enough to go and take the next steps with our drill program. In fact, we were confident enough before we even got the assay results. So this coming drill program has been many weeks in the planning. So we're always knew we were going to be doing this, but we'll also continue to acquire these geochemistry and geophysical data sets as well. We've got Mount Squires sitting in the background, and I'd be rapt to get out there and do some work on that later this year as well. So it's a busy 2021 left in front of us. I've said we're well supported, and I think I'd like to thank some of our major shareholders now who've really enjoyed what we're doing. And look, I think we're well set up for the foreseeable future. So, David, I'll leave it there, and I'll take some questions if there's any.
Great presentation. Thank you very much. And I think it's important for people to remember that Yarrawindah and this whole area is a new mineralisation zone, as you mentioned, and what's required in these types of zones, and Julimar and Chalice have shown it, is a systematic exploration program that is well thought out and well planned, that will continue to give you more information, more data to help you vector in on the key targets. So that clearly has been achieved over the last sort of 6-7 months, and the plan is definitely there ahead of you. So it's important for shareholders to understand that the work just has to be done to get the results. And clearly Caspin and the experienced team you have are delivering on that. I do have a question in regards to Chalice. So Chalice have obviously experienced great results in the region, and they're a major shareholder of Caspin. Do they ever sort of share any of their learnings to help you vector in on where you should be putting the drill bit and putting your attention?
Yes. So look, we've got a great relationship with Chalice. They're obviously a major shareholder. I think they recognise the strategic value of the company, that they were, nobody was forcing to invest in us. I think it's an endorsement of what we're doing. We do discuss what we're seeing with them, and that helps. And we seek their feedback, and that helps our understanding. I think we'll probably spend more time. We're still in the early stages of assessing the assay results, and then we need to go back to the core and review that. But yeah, I've no doubt we'll probably get together one afternoon and go over the core and compare notes. And that's healthy for both companies, and probably also for other companies in the region.
And I was going to touch on that. Your results are, I suppose, as important to Chalice as their results are to you.
Well, I think they've probably got more important things to worry about, in terms of the upcoming resource. But yeah, look, they're interested in, Chalice obviously talk about the province, and so I guess what we're doing helps speak to the opportunity of the province. I don't think I'm talking out of school to suggest that they're hoping that they're going to have more than just Gonival as a deposit. They're actively exploring north of a long trend north of Gonaville, and I can't remember the prospect now, Hartog, and there's a couple other prospects there. I'm sure that they're hopeful that they turn out to be new deposits as well. And I think if we can prove that that Gonaville isn't just a one-hit wonder, well, it certainly helps both of us.
And in terms of XC29, what's next?
Yeah, so I've deliberately left XC29 out of the presentation today. So we did get the results back for XC29. I've left it out simply because the results were need more work, basically. I think I've mentioned before that the sediment, the sulfides were hosted in a sedimentary unit, which was a little bit unexpected. And then when we've got the assay results back, we have got anomalous nickel and copper and PGs sort of in a sedimentary rock, but there's also mafics and ultramafics kicking around as well. And it's just a little bit complex for us. And to be honest, we're not really in a position to talk about what's next for XC29 until we understand it properly. Yarrawindah Hill was a little bit more straightforward. We had a really good understanding about what we had there. But XC29, and indeed the entire Brassica trend, which is 9 kilometres, is probably a little bit lesser in terms of our understanding. And we need to go to work and put a bit of effort into understanding that before we sort of communicate the next steps to the market.
And are you planning on drilling any deeper holes?
Yeah, that's right. So, and that gets back to that point about whether we've actually drilled through the base of the intrusion or not. We've got EIS funding. So thank you to the WA government. That's a co-funded drill program, so they'll split the costs with us. And we're going to drill a deep hole right through the intrusion up to about 800 metres. So we'll get a really good sense for the stratigraphy from that hole. And it may be that Barron Gabbro unit that I mentioned is not the base. It's, we could go back into another mineralised intrusion that perhaps doesn't daylight near surface, so effectively a blind target. Who knows? It's, that's an exciting drill program, and that'll be happening later this year. I think we're roughly scheduled for about September, October.
And when you talk, this is a sort of a technical question. I'm not a technical person, so I'll try and present it in a way that's easy for you to understand. When you talk about the base, what does below the base mean? The question here is, my reading of the announcement, perhaps faulty, suggests that the mafic rocks may end there because of the word base.
Yeah, so that's been taken out of context. So base in this case is in terms of that mineralized part of the intrusion, but not necessarily base of the entire intrusion per se. So, and that's what we need to determine. So, we'll drill a deep hole and work it out.
And in terms of, there's a question here about the aerial gravity survey.
Yep.
What's your timing on results, do you think, for that?
The data's being processed. So it was only completed flying last Thursday, I think it was. It takes time to process that, and it takes even more time to try and understand it. It's not as straightforward as just looking at drill results, assays. So we need to put some context around it. Red blobs on maps isn't going to mean anything to anybody until we put some context around it. What does this anomaly mean? And we're not just talking about where we're trying to map these intrusions, but we're also trying to map the geometry of them as well. And I've talked about how, whether they're flat or dipping can be quite important from a mineralisation perspective. So there's a bit of work to go in that, but that's something that we'll see probably in the next couple of weeks, I'd imagine. And
of the upcoming 20-hole campaign, is that a mixture of RC and diamond, or all RC?
All RC. So yeah, all RC. Really keen to see that up dip closer to surface position tested, and a long strike. There's no such thing as bad data at this stage. The more holes we can drill, the better off we'll be.
Now, I remember talking to you at the time of Caspin listing and asking how excited you were about the prospect and the prospectivity of this area. Do you remain as excited now as you were then? Oh,
absolutely. More so. Yeah, no. So, and I guess that's the point. We've actually taken this project to the next level. That's that's not reflected in our share price at the moment, but we've certainly taken it to the next level. And I think that's, well, let's talk about share price for a moment. You know, I think that's what people are going to come back and realise is the value opportunity. We're a hell of a lot more further down the road now than what we were back in November. And you know, in terms of ticking boxes, we've ticked a lot more. You know, sure, we haven't quite got that economic discovery yet, and I'm sure a lot of people were kind of hoping for that out of this program, and you know, quite frankly, so was I. But you know, that's not that's rarely the case in exploration. You know, not everybody can drill a discovery hole with their first campaign. But yeah, absolutely, we're so much better off than we were back in November. So yeah, no, I'm pumped.
And is the key here, and I touched on it when I sort of introduced the questions, it's all about doing the work, right? It's about being systematic, drilling the holes, having a plan and sticking to it. And clearly that's what Caspin's doing, and the plan isn't changing and hasn't changed.
No, not really. The only thing that's changed with the plan is we've compressed it. We've brought a lot of things forward that we originally, you know, when you do a prospectus, you plan out 2 years. I think all we've done really with our exploration plan is compressed it. Sure, we're probably tweaking things a little bit in terms of where we go to from here, you know, next. But acquiring a gravity survey was never part of our thinking in the first year of our existence, but it is now. It's done. So yeah, we're doing all the usual sort of exploration things systematically. We're doing good science. We're probably just doing it a little bit faster than what we originally planned. But that's great for our shareholders, and I think it's great for everybody.
A great story. Clearly, the story hasn't changed. The plan's in place. The opportunity's there. Exciting times for shareholders. Greg, if you could leave shareholders with one last message, what would it be?
Oh, well, hold on. It's going to be, I think it's been a fun ride so far, and I think there'll be more fun times ahead.
Greg, thanks for your time, and this webinar has been recorded, so we'll make sure a copy is available to shareholders in the very near future. But as we mentioned, a lot of work ahead, a lot of news flow to come. The plan's clearly in place, well funded. Greg, thanks for your time.
Thanks, David, and thanks everyone for listening.